Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Al, and in Season 2 content of the War Within expansion, we saw a variety of different endgame activities get revamped by quite a decent bit, with a lot of work being put into delves specifically. Mostly to improve the rewards from delves, whether you want to give players more opportunity to upgrade their hero track gear, craft some of the best gear available, or get some of the strongest trinkets from delves specifically. And delves are filled with some of the best trinkets in the game. Just running a sim on my character and trying to see what kind of items I can get from delves, I was legitimately surprised just how strong a lot of these items are. And many of the delve trinkets, even on hero track, are very competitive and comparable to some of the best mythic raid trinkets from the liberation of Undermine instance. So if you're somebody who's been skipping out on delving and avoided majority of the content, you'll be surprised to know the delves actually saw a big addition of brand new trinkets for Season 2. And many of them are actually very competitive right now as of this moment. Definitely should run sims to find out what is the best for your character, but I did want to detail some of the strongest and the best delve trinkets that you should be on the lookout for. As they may not seem like massive trinkets, they're actually very solid, especially if you can get them on hero track level. As always, if you guys want to see more regular updates for Season 2 content of the War Within expansion, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Before we actually get into some of these trinkets, I first want to go over how to farm them. And it's also very important that if you are trying to get some of the most accurate data for your classes, every single class is going to utilize these trinkets differently or find strengths and weaknesses with these trinkets a little differently. It's also a good idea to sim your character, which can be done with the Raidbot's website. At the very least, you can use the Droptomizer feature to see if any of these trinkets are a gain. But for many classes out there, these trinkets are a gain, especially with them getting quite a sizable buff. It just depending on your class and your abilities. Certain classes do synergize with some of these trinkets a little bit better. I will mention a couple of synergies that I found. I tried to do as much research as I could, but there's a lot of really strong trinkets from these delves. Majority of them will be at hero track, however, because you can't really get trinkets on mythic track. Champion track is pretty solid, but where they become competitive is on the hero track specifically. And if you are trying to farm delve trinkets, there's only so many ways for you to be able to get them on hero track. The first one will be from your weekly map in order to get a chance at a random hero track item, possibly one of these trinkets. And if you're someone who's just not getting lucky with maps, you can always spend 2,000 undercoins on a scrambler from Sir Furley Merlgaton to summon the underpin boss for a guaranteed map. Outside of that, you should spam at the very least tier 8 delves until you cap out for your weekly vault, just to have more chances at items from your great vault every single week. The delve that I picked for my fastest runs is probably the Street Side Sluice. If you're just trying to get a quick completion without too much navigating or exploration, I feel like that delve is really compact and everything is close together, so that one's probably the easiest and the most straightforward to get through them very quickly. If you are trying to get some of these trinkets even on champion track, you can always do bountiful delves for the keys in order to get more chances at just raw gear, but the hero track trinkets is what you're ideally hoping for. You can get them on lower tier, but hero track is really where they have their competitive edge if you're really trying to make sure you get in some of the best items from delves specifically. With a lot of the hero track items, as a lot of the mythic raid gear and dungeon gear will outclass the champion track delve trinkets, but the hero track is a lot more competitive and a lot more even with the mythic track, and that's what we ideally are looking for. The first of those trinkets that many classes actually enjoy is the Turbo Drain 5000, a simple trinket that provides you your primary stats plus your harmful abilities have a chance to deal nature damage to a target, and if the target dies while being drained, you also gain movement speed. The movement speed is pretty okay, but primarily what you like about this trinket is the raw damage that it provides. It's just an extra additional zap damage that's fairly consistent, even though it's passive, but it is generally solid, and many players do stand by the fact that this trinket is generally one of the better ones from delves, just in terms of raw output that it has. If you're looking for a passive trinket that just does additional damage, which is primarily single target, but can be alright just in terms of the amount of times it procs within like Mythic Plus content, it just ends up being a very solid option that provides us with the stats we need, but also with the additional damage output that it offers. Another trinket that's also very solid, especially for certain classes that play around specific cooldowns, is the Funhouse Lens. It is an on-use trinket with lots of primary stats from intellect, agility, and strength, but it also has a 1.5 minute cooldown, providing you of either 10,000 critical strike or haste for 15 seconds. This trinket is a great on-use trinket for the select classes that are in a 1.5 minute CD window. Most classes that Blizzard designs are either a 3-minute class or a 2-minute class, and this trinket technically considers as with 3-minute classes just because you could use a trinket with your cooldowns, then natively by itself outside of cooldowns, then it'll sync back up with your cooldowns. But for certain specs like Windwalker Monks, Unholy Death Knights, Arms Warriors, this is a great synergetic trinket that lines up with their cooldowns easily, and it provides a stat that all three of those at the very least can utilize. Technically, there's also subtlety rogues who can benefit from crit, but the haste is just not really that worth it. But that will be another spec that is technically in that 1.5 minute CD window. It's a surprisingly good trinket that provides you a huge bulk of stats, depending whether you get the haste or whether you get the crit. And for specs that are 1.5 minute CD that utilize either one of those stats somewhat equally, it's just a huge bulk of stats to line up with your cooldowns, and it generally ends up being a very sought after combo. Another one that many classes that enjoy secondary stats love is Mecha Core Amplifier. Specifically, if you're playing specs like Fury Warriors or anything that loves secondary stats over primary. The trinket is an agility and a strength trinket, so casters won't get to utilize it, but it provides you with either one of two powerful effects. Either your harmful spells and abilities have a chance to increase either your highest secondary stat by about 4,000 or your lowest stat by 5,000, so you get more stats on your worst stat. So if your class utilizes all stats fairly equally, even your worst stat providing you decent damage gain, this ends up being a very solid trinket that has a really decent uptime. So specs like Fury Warrior in particular, for them it'll provide haste or mastery depending how they're statted, but even a stat like versatility, which is generally something they don't really invest heavily into, 5,000 proc of versatility is a huge gain in damage, and with the uptime that this trinket has, it is right now one of the better options for a handful of specs. So it really will depend on the spec that you have, but if you are the type of spec, maybe like Archimage for instance, I guess Archimage doesn't work because this thing doesn't have intellect, but if let's say this thing had intellect on it, Archimage technically likes all the stats somewhat equally. Haste is a better stat at the moment, Mastery is also highly valued, but technically everything is a gain either way. So for specs like those that basically use everything, this is a very solid gain for the performance that it offers. So these three are some of the better trinkets that you can get from Delves, and then there's two other options that are also consistent, though not nearly as flavorful or as exciting. If you're a class that enjoys Mastery, the Suspicious Energy Drink is another solid option. Using harmful spells and abilities grants you a chance at a Mastery, and you get additional Mastery if you're below a certain amount of health. So in some cases, this could be a good trinket like in raids, if let's say you're constantly dropping super low on health, or in Mythic Plus dungeons, if you are getting hit by AoE damage and super high keys, and this trinket procs, that could actually give you a little bit extra stats, but this one is specifically designed for Mastery focused classes. But its uptime is really good. It is available for intellect users, agility users, and strength users, so any class that utilizes Mastery quite a decent bit, it's actually going to be at a pretty decent gain. And depending on the content that you do, if you do find yourself at fairly lowish health numbers fairly regularly, you can actually gain a little bit extra Mastery out of it, so this could maybe be good for progression content, like in certain raid fights. Players are just going to get hit with a ton of AoE. You're naturally going to be brought to low health as part of a healer mechanic to keep everybody alive. So in those cases, Suspicious Energy Drink could actually be really solid there. Another trinket that's surprisingly decent is the Rat Fang Toxin. Nothing insane or nothing to write home about, but it's a solid trinket nonetheless. It is an on-use trinket that allows you to inject nature damage into the target, available for intellect, agility, and strength users. While the damage numbers do seem a little bit low on its own, 900, almost a million nature damage, plus about, 100,000 over 5 seconds per stack, and you can get up to 5 stacks. So if you're looking at 1.5 million damage every 1.5 minutes from the trinket, the damage that it provides, at least in comparison to everything else that's available, is very comparable and not that bad. It's a purely single target trinket that just offers an injection of raw damage. Now the next trinket is going to be maybe a little bit more specific in terms of the content you get to use it in. Like if you do a lot of Mythic Plus dungeons, this may be a somewhat of a solid choice to get from delves. Nothing insane, but the Trinket is something that does initial damage, very similar to the Rat Fang, but this one is a little bit better for Mythic Plus content for the 2-minute cooldown that it offers. It's a trinket available for intellect, agility, and strength users, where you get to fashion nearby garbage into a sphere and launch it into the sky. After 3 seconds of gathering momentum, sphere crashes into the targeted location, dealing 2.5 million damage split evenly amongst all enemies in the area. When fully upgraded, the trinket does about 2.5 million damage every 2 minutes. And it does have its damage split amongst multiple enemies, so whether you use it on a single target or in AoE, the trinket at the very least has consistent value that it provides every 2 minutes. It does have a little quirk where it has a bit of a delay, like it tosses glob out into the air. It takes a little bit before it lands, but if you plan around when you use this trinket, or maybe use it during like a big burst window when an enemy takes more damage, it could be a very solid gain and very comparable to some of the other options that are available. Now the last trinket we'll talk about is probably the wackiest of the bunch, and this one will really depend how it scales, depending on your class, depending on what abilities you use. And certain classes are definitely going to find more value in it than others. And that is going to be the Noggenfogger's Ultimate Deluxe, a trinket that provides you critical strike but no primary stats, and it summons a black water pirate to aid you in combat for 20 seconds. It's a very unique trinket that does not seem that strong at first unless that black water pirate has additional value behind him. And apparently the pirate does scale with the character that uses the trinket. The trinket is a simple interaction where you just basically get to summon a pirate to aid you in combat. So if, let's say, I get in combat with the Kelp Fist and then I summon a pirate to aid me, you'll see a pirate pop up and start attacking the Kelp Fist with auto attacks. This pirate, however, scales with the player. And for some classes that actually have gains within, let's say, auto attack speeds, the faster auto attack speed you have, that pirate will scale with your own auto attack speed. So some classes are definitely going to have different scaling with this trinket. Though any class that gains any kind of advantage on auto attack speed or any kind of haste buffs or global cooldown reduction buffs, then this trinket will scale with you. So most melee classes that do have access to anything that increases your auto attack speed specifically, this trinket will scale directly with it. And apparently this thing can do a lot of damage over like a 5-minute encounter. A huge portion of it will be pure single target. There is a little bit of an issue though from this trinket. It doesn't always appear properly in details, as it is its own entity. You summon an NPC into combat and the add-on just doesn't really know how to track it properly. So sometimes you may not see those numbers attributed to you, but know that the trinket does end up doing work. Even in logs, it shows up as a separate entity. It doesn't attribute the damage as part of your damage, but the trinket does do a significant bit of your overall damage when you do summon him on some of those classes that scale with it excellently. So the best thing I would do in that situation is sim your character, and if the trinket does end up giving you a significant gain in pure single target, then it may actually be a decent bit of a gain to use in Liberation of Undermine. Even though it doesn't technically inflate your damage within the details, within logs, it does provide a significant damage output either way. So definitely run a sim for this one specifically, but if you're somebody who's playing Outlaw Rogue right now in Season 2, apparently that class, that spec specifically, has some of the best scaling with that trinket as of this moment. So you may want to be on the lookout for this one at all times. As always though, I want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community to keep up with all the newest updates and patch notes that appear as the season goes on within Season 2 content. Also, let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.